Raven, that's the big thing for this month, really.
I'm not that into Raven.
Raven's WWE contract came up, and 2 days later he jumped to TNA.
Fuck yeah! I'm so happy about this.
Yeah, if you watch the watch along, Liam's reaction to Raven is just pure ecstasy.
I threw my hands up in the air and I didn't know what to do with them, so I just kept them up there.
Like, Liam is just in pure glee and elation for just the remainder of that watch along and just the entire outro. He's just so happy that Raven has showed up, because I was actually quite upset. If you go and listen to the watch along, there's a period where you notice a Raven sign in the crowd, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to reveal the surprise that Raven shows up at the end of the show, so I tried to play it coy, and thankfully you didn't catch on.
Yeah, Raven, as a kid, Raven was one of my favorite wrestlers, so I was very excited to see his debut, and he looked like a fucking killer.
Yeah, like, these shows are just desperately in need of stars, because like when BG James is one of like the most well-known big name acts, you so badly need somebody new, and that somebody new is Raven, who's a good wrestler and probably even more importantly a great promo and has star value and has a name and can do the right kind of match in the TNA environment. He's exactly the kind of wrestler TNA needed at that. Obviously, like, if they could get Kurt Angle here, it would be even better. But for realistically, who TNA could pull, who TNA could afford, and who would be willing to go to TNA, like, Raven is the perfect wrestler for them at this stage.
And just going on to the last show for a second, the Raven-Jarrett feud feels like the biggest thing this company's ever done.
Oh, far and away, and it does over the months develop into like the biggest match in company history by the time they do it. Like, it's a world title match. Like, to be fair to the Killings and Jarrett title match back in 2002, like, that felt like a big title match. It felt like a big deal by the time they actually got to doing it. And like, a lot of the other the title matches on these shows are absolutely terrible. It's just Jarrett defending against freaking John Harris Daniels and BG James. Nobody wants to see that. So when you do get to the Jarrett and Raven match, it's like, oh, this is like a real challenger taking it to Jarrett, an actual guy who could beat him, instead of a guy who you have no faith whatsoever in beating him.
Also, for like the first time, it really feels like two stars relatively in their primes fighting in the main event.
Yeah, because say like Ron Killings, as we mentioned on the Patreon show where we gave out awards, breakout star of 2002 easily. But I don't think anybody considered him a main event star, even at that stage. Even now, in like early 2003, he slipped firmly back into the mid-card. Like, he eats a loss to, was it Flair or Sanders he lost to on these shows? He lost to one of them.
Sanders.
Yeah, he's lost to Sanders. And fair enough, it's via botched interference from Jerry Lynn, but he's still getting pinned by Mike Sanders. So, like, that tells you how quickly Killings has been downcycled, and how probably unfairly Killings has been downcycled. But you do have Raven, who feels like the second he shows up, like, he shows up at the end of the third show of the month on NWA-TNA pay-per-view number 29, January 22nd. Like, Jarrett's just defended the belt. Raven shows up, drops him with the even flow, steals the belt, crowd goes nuts. He looks really cool with the jacket and the hair, and he hits his pose. And it does feel like a cool moment.
I already have one criticism of the Raven stuff, though.
Oh, no.
A, he should have kept that look. It's much better than his look that he ends up going with. And B, his first thing that he did on his first real night was get beat up by Jeff Jarrett and saved by Vince Russo.
Yeah, so the next night he comes out, or the next week on the January 29th pay-per-view, he comes out, he does his promo how he wants to win the belt with some of your favourite lines in TNA history.
I want to urinate in Jeff Jarrett's bone marrow.
Which would take quite a bit of effort to get all the way through to the bone marrow to piss in it.
It's also really funny that, like, well, I assume he would murder him first and then chop him into pieces and piss in his bone marrow.
I think you have thought about this.
I mean, I broke down the psychology of the line. What can I say? And then, more interestingly, it's like, he starts this off and he's over as hell. And the whole, like, asylum is chanting Raven, right? And then he just immediately goes into the "you people" promo. But he gets them to turn on him, which I guess is the point. But it just feels like a waste of a star to not use that initial hype and to turn him straight away.
And if you think about it, like, Jarrett was a heel, but the sex stuff turned Jarrett babyface. Whereas, like, if Jarrett was a heel and you had babyface Raven coming in, I think that dynamic is so much better.
But I also think you could have played, like, I know you're doing it with AJ right now, but I think you could have done a more blatant playing both sides character with Raven. And I think that would have been better because it would have kept him as, like, a tweener leaning babyface, which I think there's a lot more money in than straight up just heel Raven coming in. Especially as, you know, when you're so desperate for stars, when the only one you really have is Jarrett.
Yeah, and I think it does go back to the thing you mentioned where it's like they're already doing like 3 different people like flirting with joining sex or maybe not joining sex. So when you introduce Raven to be the next person to do that, it's like, all right, like you did it with Jorge, you did it with AJ, and you even did it with Percy Pringle. So
yeah, but my argument would be I think it would be better to use it as Raven is using sex as opposed to sex is using Raven. Like he's using these guys to get his rocks off. The joke was right there. No, he's using these guys to get the title, but he's not really with them.
yeah.